When the internet began, bulletin board services, or BBS, became the first online communities of the so-called information superhighway. Using their phone lines, people logged in from all over America to talk about sports, games, movies, and on one BBS in particular, share their ghost stories. Over time, those communities all went dark, except for one lone server that continues to operate somewhere in an unknown part of Pennsylvania's Rust Belt. A relic of the 1990s, veiled in mystery, it is a digital archive of humanity's strangest encounters with the unknown, as told by the people who experienced them. My name is Brandon Schexnayder, and you are listening to Fear Daily.
Subject: The Reflector. User: BBComback9. Posted March 3rd, 1998.
First thing I noticed was the bicycle reflector on the kitchen counter. Not the bike itself, just the small white oval that used to hang beneath the seat, the plastic face cracked straight through like a thin, crooked smile. It sat beside the mail and a chipped coffee mug, positioned so neatly it looked intentional, as if I'd placed it there myself and simply forgot. I stood in the doorway with my keys still in my hand and stared at it long enough for my fingers to stiffen around the metal. I lived alone. That had become the defining truth of the house, a small, one-story place at the end of a quiet street where most of the families had moved on and the remaining houses seemed to be holding their breath. When you live alone long enough, you learn the sounds of your space. The refrigerator cycling on and off, the dry pop of wood adjusting to the cold, the faint tick of the wall clock in the living room. You stop reacting because none of it means anything. The reflector meant something. It belonged to my daughter. I crossed the kitchen slowly, my eyes drifting to the window over the sink, half expecting to find an explanation waiting outside. Kids cutting through the yard, a neighbor holding something that didn't belong to them. The yard was empty. Winter dead grass, a still street. I picked the reflector up and turned it over. Dirt clung to the grooves on the back, packed in tight and dry, the kind that only came from pavement and scraped knees. My chest tightened because I hadn't seen dirt like that since the afternoon she was killed. I set it down carefully and noticed, beneath the grocery list written in my own hand, a crayon drawing I didn't remember keeping. 3 stick figures holding hands under a sun with a smiling face. One tall, one shorter, one small, with jagged lines for hair like lightning bolts. At the bottom were the words, "Daddy, Mommy, Me," printed unevenly, the paper creased and soft from being folded too many times. The house felt alert then. Not quiet, aware. That night, the noises began just after 2 a.m. I knew the time because the red numbers on the clock radio beside my bed read 2:13, glowing faintly in the dark. It was a number that had already started to follow me, cropping up in places I didn't want to notice, attaching itself to memories whether I invited it or not. The sound was small at first, a gentle tapping somewhere in the hallway, followed by a dragging scrape like something being pulled across the floor. It was too deliberate to dismiss, too measured to explain away. I lay still, listening as the tapping drew closer, scraping following behind it with patience. When I opened the bedroom door, the hallway looked wrong. Darker than it should have been. The nightlight we used to keep plugged in had been gone for months, but the darkness now felt thicker, like it had weight. On the floor, just outside my door, sat a small blue rubber ball, glitter suspended inside as if frozen mid-motion. I hadn't seen it since before the funeral. I picked it up and it squeaked loudly, the sound too sharp for the hour. From the far end of the hall came the unmistakable ring of a bicycle bell, bright, cheerful, completely out of place. The sound came again, closer this time, followed by a thin laugh that didn't quite register as sound at all, more like the echo of one pressing into the air. I backed into my room and shut the door, gripping the ball until my fingers ached while the house stayed awake around me. In the morning, I found thin, parallel lines etched into the dust on the hallway floor, tire tracks. They led straight to the second bedroom door and stopped there. I didn't open it. That room had been sealed by grief and cowardice, preserved in a way I couldn't undo. The bed was still made. The stars still clung to the ceiling. The helmet still hung on its hook. Time had stopped there, and I didn't want to know what had been growing in the stillness. After that, the house changed. Objects reappeared after I'd thrown them away. Smudges formed on clean glass at the height of a child's hands. Footsteps creaked in the ceiling late at night, slow and measured, even though there was nothing up there but insulation and boxes of old Christmas decorations. And always, there was the bell, ringing softly at first, then louder, as if reminding me of something I was pretending not to hear. One evening, I came home and smelled perfume, faint but unmistakable, clinging to the air as though it had seeped out of the walls. It brought my wife back in pieces, the way she used to sit curled on the couch, watching through the front window as our daughter rode her bike back and forth on the sidewalk, streamers flashing like something alive. The day my daughter died had been painfully ordinary. Late afternoon, clear sky, cold enough to sting your face, but not enough to keep a kid indoors. She'd just gotten new pink streamers for her handlebars and couldn't stop looking down at them, smiling like they were magic. I'd been inside the kitchen table, staring at overdue bills, thinking I deserved a few minutes of quiet, thinking the sound of her laughter drifting through the open window was irritating. The impact didn't come with warning. No screeching tires, no drawn-out moment. Just a dull, brutal sound that didn't belong to the day. Everything after that blurred into bright hospital lights and stiff waiting room chairs and a doctor's voice that seemed to lose coherence halfway through each sentence. The absence she left behind was louder than anything that came before it. It lived in the cereal cabinet, in the shoes by the door, and the way the house still seemed to expect her. My wife and I, we didn't survive it. At first we clung together because there was nothing else to hold on to, but then the blame crept in. Quiet and insidious, disguised as reason. Someone should have been outside. Someone should have watched her more closely. The arguments sharpened, dragging in old resentments into the open until grief wasn't the only thing poisoning the air, and eventually my wife stopped sleeping in our bed. And then she stopped coming home at all. When she disappeared, she didn't pack or shout or slam doors. She simply faded, like someone already halfway gone. The haunting grew worse after that. The house began to feel crowded. One night I woke up to the sensation of being watched and saw a shape standing in my doorway, small and still, the air around it shimmering as if heat and cold were colliding. The smell of wet earth filled the room, and when the lamp snapped on, the doorway was empty, but damp footprints led from the hall to the foot of my bed and stopped there. The sheets tugged downward, hard and sudden, as if seized by unseen hands. The bell rang again, no longer playful, echoing through the house like an accusation. I followed the sound to the second bedroom. The door looked damaged now. The paint bubbled and warped, the knob slick with cold. Before I could touch it, I sensed something behind me. I turned and saw my wife standing in the kitchen doorway, her face drained of color, her eyes hollow. A dark bruise encircled her throat, unmistakable in shape. She didn't speak, and she didn't need to. The truth surfaced all at once, violent and unavoidable. Not the softened version I told myself, not the one where grief tore us apart slowly, the real one. The night we fought over whose fault it was our daughter died, the way words failed, the way my hands closed around my wife's neck, the way I convinced myself it had been an accident because the alternative was unbearable. The bedroom door opened on its own. Inside, the air vibrated with fury, and at the center of the room stood my daughter, or what remained of her. Eyes dark and burning with knowledge no child should possess. She wasn't angry about the car. She wasn't angry about being alone. The bell rang once more, sharp and final, and the walls leaned inward, ready to finish what grief had started.
Subject, Sineater. User, BatchBrew23. Posted April 12, 1995.
This isn't exactly a supernatural thing, so maybe this isn't the right place to talk about it, but honestly, I don't know who else to tell. Late last year, I got divorced from my wife, Laura, and moved out here to Madison, Wisconsin. The divorce was all my fault. I'm a real bastard to live with, so I let Laura have pretty much everything except for the clothes on my back and enough for my first couple months' rent. It's a miracle she lasted as long as she did. I sure as hell don't much like living with me either. Moving from a 3-bedroom house to a bachelor apartment has been a surprisingly easy adjustment. I've got a little routine that I like well enough. Mornings, I'll pick up a coffee from Steep and Brew before work. Then Wednesdays, I go to Essen House for the Wurst Teller platter with Turinger and Spatzel. God, I love Spatzel. My grandmother used to make them as a treat when I was a kid, and no matter how many times I have it, it takes me right back to her kitchen. So, Essen House Wednesday, and then Saturday mornings, if the line isn't too bad, I get a couple pastries from Miles Teddy Wedgers. It's as good a thing as I could ask for, so I suppose I shouldn't be surprised to have found a snake in the garden. The problem is work, or more specifically, the guys I work with. I'm on a cleaning crew that services a bunch of buildings in town, including a couple of the bigger ones. I didn't know how many people use this thing or who, so I don't want to be too specific, but anyways, it seemed like a good crew when I got hired. Hell, I still think they're a good crew, but something about them isn't right. You ever hang around somebody who won't stop talking about something to the point where you start to think it might kind of be their thing? That's how all this started. My boss, who I'll call Alan, was real welcoming right from the start. Said that he and the other boys in the crew liked to hang out together after work a couple nights a week, and that I was welcome to join, but there was no obligation. First couple times I begged off, but the next week I figured it was better to build a few bridges and join them at Schooners. Everyone was real cool about it. They bought a couple rounds, I bought a couple rounds, and afterward, I felt like this was something I could get into. The next time we got together, it was to go fishing on Lake Mendoza. I'm not much for fishing, but again, building bridges, right? It was me, Alan, and two guys I'll call Jason and Peter going out on Alan's boat. The first couple hours were fine. We drank a few beers and no one said much of anything. But then Jason said something funny. Not ha-ha funny, but weird funny. Peter got a bite on his line and Jason said, "Gotcha a Sineater." If I hadn't been looking right at Alan when it happened, I wouldn't have caught the look he gave Jason, a "are you for real" kind of face. I looked over at Jason, who was shrugging in response to Alan. "Sineater is a Sineater, Alan," he said. "Either he's on board or he's not." When he replied, Alan's voice was sharper than I'd heard it before. He said, "And there'll be time for it, just not right now." That was the end of the conversation, and shortly afterward, Peter started reeling in the fish. The word Sineater wasn't mentioned again until we were at work the following week. I can't say which building we were cleaning, but I'll say it has an educational purpose. Peter was buffing the floor, and Jason came up behind me. He said to me, "Peter loves the buffer. He likes to make the floor shine so bright the sinners could see their reflections, if they had them. They don't, of course. That's how we know them. How we know who to feed to the sin-eaters." As soon as he said it, Alan popped up practically out of nowhere and split us up, sending me to clean windows at the far end of the wing. I pretended like all of this was normal and started walking, but behind me, I could hear Alan whisper something like, "Not ready." I didn't catch anything else, but what I'd heard already was enough to make me uneasy. It didn't come up again for a while, and I thought maybe it had been some kind of initiation prank until Alan told me to meet him at Schooners after work on Wednesday. When I got there, he was alone and had taken over a booth at the back. Jason and Peter were nowhere to be seen, which was a first. The whole thing felt like a scene from some mobster movie, like I was about to be asked to do a favor for The Godfather or something. Looking back, I wish it had been that. After I sat down and Ginny brought me a beer, Alan said there was something he wanted to talk about with me. He said that he had intended to wait, but Jason's careless speech, and those were his exact words, Jason's careless speech, had forced him to talk to me sooner rather than later. After I sat down and Ginny brought me a beer, Alan said there was something he wanted to talk about with me. He said that he had intended to wait, but Jason's careless speech, and those were his exact words, Jason's careless speech, had forced him to talk to me sooner rather than later. He asked me if I believed in God, and I said I didn't. I said I supposed that was true, sure. In response, Alan nodded like I'd said the right thing. He said that he and the boys were part of a group who believed they could change all this, could, through carefully considered action, redirect the downward spiral of society and correct the imbalances which allowed the avaricious few to rule over the many. He said if I wanted to join them, he could introduce me to others who felt the same way. That there were freedom fighters, again his own words, who were making moves already. Against the sinners, you mean? Alan's eyebrows went up at the question and he chuckled. He said those were Jason's words because he viewed things through the lens of his Christianity, but that the fight transcended religion. He said that I didn't have to join, but that if I ultimately declined, it would be best if I found other work. And it went without saying that I shouldn't discuss this with anyone else. I tried to press him for more information, but he just said that I had to wait, that I would learn more when he felt I was ready. I went along with it, but internally, I was full on freaking out. I'm not a joiner, no matter the cause, and this was giving me what Laura used to call bad vibes. It's been almost a week since that meeting, and everything at work has been normal. No mention of sins or Sineaters or silent revolutions, but now that I know these guys are doing, well, something, I don't know which direction to turn. I'm concerned someone is going to get hurt. Hell, that they already have.
Fear Daily is an independent podcast hosted by Brandon Schexnayder and written by Brennan Storr, with Joanna Smith serving as the consulting editor, audio production by Rachel Boyd, and sound design by Southern Gothic Media. This podcast is a work of fiction. Names, characters, places, and incidents are either products of the author's imagination or are used fictitiously. Any resemblance to actual persons, living or dead, or to real events or locations, is entirely coincidental. Ad-free versions of Fear Daily are available now on your favorite podcast apps. For more information, visit feardaily.com. But move fast, before the server goes offline.